we are going to review on how to write linear equations from graphs. Here is our first graph. We are going to write a linear equation from this graph. There are several different equations we have studied that you are aware of that we can put this graph in that form. Standard form, slope-intercept form, and point-slope form. Any of these forms will do. I am going to choose to do slope-intercept form because it requires the least amount of calculations and manipulation of equations. Slope-intercept form is defined as y equals mx plus b, where m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. You are welcome to find the y-intercept and then find the slope. However, I, in this case, am going to find the slope and then find the y-intercept. First, let's define slope. Slope is defined as rise over run. The changes in y on top of the changes in x. I am choosing to go from this point from this equation to this point on this equation. It doesn't matter which point you use on this line, what 2 points you use on this line, we are just going to move from one point to another. In this case, this point here to that point there. Let's start with our rise. 1, 2, 3, 4. I rose 4 steps. Now let's do our run. 1, 2. I ran 2 steps. Now this 4 was positive because I moved up. If I moved down, it would be negative. This 2 is negative because I moved left. If I moved right, it would be positive. Now we have our slope. Our change in y, which is positive 4, goes on top. The change in x, which is negative 2, goes on bottom. In algebra, we always simplify everything we do. In this case, this is a plus 4 over a negative 2. Positive 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. Now we need to find our y-intercept. Y-intercept is defined as where this graph touches the y-axis. At which point does this graph touch the y-axis? You guessed it, it's at positive 5. We are ready to write our equation. Y equals negative 2x plus 5. That is our equation for this line. We next have this graph here. Still using slope-intercept form because it's the easiest. This time I'm going to find my y-intercept first and then find the slope. Looking for the y-intercept, I'm looking for where this line here, this graph, crosses the y-axis. Where does this graph cross the y-axis at? You guessed it, at positive 1. Positive 1. I'm going to move from this point here to this point here. What am I trying to find when I move from one point to another point? I'm looking for the slope. So I'm going to go down 2, then left 2. Moving down is a negative movement, so I moved down 2 and then left 2. To write that as a fraction would be -2 over -2. In algebra, we simplify. -2 divided by -2 is a +1. Good arithmetic. Now we're going to write our equation. Now we don't have to leave our answer as such. We can actually change it to x plus 1. So this equation is for that graph. Well, we have another graph here. I'm going to write the equation for this graph. On top of that, I'm going to even create a table from it. Let's begin. I'm going to use slope-intercept form since I'm going to do some extra work. This is my slope-intercept form, and I'm going to find my y-intercept and then my slope. What is the y-intercept? It is where the graph touches the y-axis. And in this case, the graph touches the y-axis at +4. I am going to move from the +4 to the next point, which is here. So let's start that movement. I've moved up 2. You see, I didn't even care what the coordinates were. I just know that I moved up 2. Now I'm going to move left 1. Up 2 and left 1 means I have a +2 divided by a -1, which gives me a -2. I can now write the equation for this line. I can even check to make sure my work is correct. I'm going to do that with my table. I'm going to write the x coordinates here and the y coordinates here. So taking a look at this point here, what is my x coordinate? That looks like a -2. Now let's find my y coordinate for this point here. That is a +8. Now let's find the coordinates for this point here. At first I didn't care, and now I do. This is a -1. And this is a +6. What about this one here? It's the y-intercept. That means that should be a 0 for the x coordinate, because here's our x where x equals 0, and our y coordinate will be 4. don't need to do every point, but I do want to do this one here. So the last point I'm going to do, the coordinates are, the x coordinate happens to be +4. And the y coordinates happen to be -4. Let's see if my work is correct. So I'm going to put in the x terms here for x, multiply by 2, add 4 to see if we get y. Let's see if it works. -2 times -2 is +4. +4 plus 4 is 8. Good job, that checked out. -2 times -1 is +2. +2 plus 4 is 6. That checked out. -2 times 0 is 0. Plus 4 is +4. Last one. -2 times +4 is -8. -8 plus 4 is -4. I did this correctly. Here's a graph. Let's see if we can find see if we can write an equation for this one. Slope-intercept form is defined as y equals mx plus b. What's my m? What's my b? Well, quickly I can decide that the y-intercept is right there. That is +2. What about my slope? Change in y over the change in x. So if I'm going to move from this point to this point, I don't go up, I don't go down. So that means that top number is going to be 0. Hey, I think I know what's going to happen. Now moving to x, I move to the right 2. 0 divided by 2 is 0. Hey! Zero times x happens to be 0. So this equation is y equals 2. Do I need to make a table to prove that? Here is my x coordinate, which is -1. What's my y coordinate? 2. Here is my x coordinate, which is 0. What's my y coordinate? 2. Here is my x coordinate, which is 1. What's my y coordinate? 2. So I know that if I see all 2s, 3s, -4s, -15s here, I know that this is going to be a y equals negative whatever this value is, if they're all the same. And then the x's change. This is a special equation. Since there is no changes in the x value, x must be 0. There is a change in the y value of +4. If there is a 0 in the denominator, this is an undefined slope, which means we are just simply going to write wherever the x value is, x coordinate is. So the x coordinate for this is -2 because it doesn't touch the y-axis at all. Hope you had a great time. I did.